a little research on the internet, right? And there's this term that is becoming popular in social media and that describes this phenomenon. And the term is called revenge travel. Wow, sounds fierce, like revenge. So that term became so popular that CNN posted a whole article about revenge traveling earlier in May. So in this article, Erica Richer, Vice President of the American Society of Travel Advisors, explains that revenge travel is actually a media buzzword that originated in 2021, when the world began to reopen and people decided to make up for their lost time. And because of the lockdowns and spending 2-ish years, depending on where you are, right, staying home, means that some people have actually saved up money, and then now's the time to spend it, right? But now the thing that stood out to me was that these people are trying to make up for their lost time. And there is something that we all lost over the past 3 years, and right now everyone is just trying to find things, right, to make up for that feeling of loss. So revenge travel is a response to that loss. For some of us, maybe not revenge travel, we are still here, right? It could be revenge spending. Right, I know, I see a photo of y'all, okay? We spend on concert tickets. We spend on new experiences. Oh, the one at Marina Bay was like long queue, like 2-hour queues, okay? The Ice World or something like that. We spend on collecting pop marts. Okay, big reaction. Okay, we spend on all these things, right, just to feel a little bit happier, a bit more fulfilled. Like, I got my revenge. My last 3 years stuck at home. Now I can go out and do everything I want. Shook, right? But then again, you'll soon realize that all this self-indulgence will hit a ceiling. Right? Till a certain point, you stop getting the pleasure you want from doing all these things. There is always a bigger, better, further holiday after this, right? There is always a next concert, the next pop mart that you can buy. Cuter one, all this variation cuter, I want to buy that. Okay, by the way, I'm not saying that all these things are bad, okay? Don't cancel me, okay? I think that self-indulge, it's okay to self-indulge sometimes. It's a very human thing. If you don't, I want to be your friend, okay? We all need some time off after all the hard work and missed opportunities from the past 3 years. But what I'm getting at is that everyone sitting here today has something deeper in our lives that we lost. And all these things that we are doing while we are going past our 3rd-year anniversary, right, are in response to that loss. And that brings me to the title of my message today is Of Losses and Scars. Okay, very, very cheap, but it's just about loss and scars, okay? Now, you might ask me, Edwin, you just say, Christmas, joyous occasion, why are you talking about such a depressing topic, right? Well, that is because I want everyone to be able to have true peace and joy in their lives and not just to be happy over these 2 weeks and then once New Year starts, right, then you go back to your depressing old selves, okay? And I think that we can all radiate this kind of inner joy and peace only when we come face to face with the things that prevents us from experiencing it. Yes. So, what is loss? The dictionary defines loss as the harm or privation resulting from losing or being separated from someone or something. Yes. So, in a simple sense, experiencing loss means that we are no longer whole. Okay, we don't feel complete. We become broken, damaged, and grieved. Now, I'm not talking about temporary material loss like losing your keys, your wallets, your phones, okay? No, that happens all the time and it's easy to replace them. I'm talking about losses that have long-term effects on you, that it hurts you physically, emotionally, or mentally. The best example I can give you now, right, is World Cup 2022, okay? Okay, so by the way, congrats to Croatia for winning the 3rd place last night, if any of you even care. I was really hoping for Morocco to win though. Also, congrats to Argentina and France for getting to the finals, and I'm excited to catch it tonight. So the World Cup is very interesting. Right? It's one of the largest sports events in the world. Now, it brings everyone together, even if you're not a soccer fan, somehow, okay? To support just 26 people who have been training very hard to get selected and to represent their countries. So for us watching and supporting, it's like, wow, fun, cool, all these teams lose, never mind, support the other team. But for the soccer players, it is their dream. And they face immense pressure every match, every training. And you know what? If you're knocked out from this year's World Cup, it means that you have to wait another 4 years to compete at the same level again. And some of the players, they might not even get to play the next World Cup because they will pass their retirement age. So to me, personally, watching Portugal and Brazil get eliminated was heartbreaking. right? As I see two of the greatest soccer heroes, Ronaldo and Neymar, crying on screen. Like, oh, I feel you. I don't know why. You're halfway across the world, but I feel you. So after their matches, right? So Ronaldo opens up to the media after his match, right? And this is what he said. So he says, to win a World Cup for Portugal was the biggest and most ambitious dream of my career. I fought for it. I fought a lot for that dream. And in the 5 times I was present in World Cups throughout 16 years, always next to great players and supported by millions of Portuguese, I gave it my all. I left everything on the field. I never faced away from the fight, and I never gave up on that dream. Unfortunately, yesterday, that dream ended. Oh, so sad. Neymar also shared his thoughts after his match. He says, I feel psychologically destroyed. Oh, this one like very, very fierce. It is definitely the defeat which has hurt me the most, which left me paralyzed for 10 minutes after the match, after which I burst into tears without being able to stop. It is going to hurt for a very long time, unfortunately. Wow, feel it, right? Even as I say it. So you can tell that they are heartbroken. And I'm sure being in this state of loss isn't going to be temporary. It's going to stick with them for the rest of their lives. And perhaps to relate to most of us here today, we have also been through a state of loss in our lives. A particular moment when you felt hurt and pain in this process of loss. So there are 2 categories of losses that we might go through. Okay, and the first category is the bad loss. So it's a kind of loss that harms and hurts you and has a negative impact on you. So perhaps some of us here know we have lost loved ones over the last 3 years. Some of us had experienced loss in our mental health. We become more anxious or we go into depression. Some of us had experienced loss in relationships and friendships. We become lonely. Or like what I started off at the beginning, right? Some of us lost time. Perhaps there were dreams and goals and things you want to achieve but have been delayed or cancelled. So while bad loss exists, there are also good losses. Okay, good riddance. So this kind of loss has a positive effect on you. So for example, losing bad habits, right? Perhaps you decide to change and you lose the habit of always being late when you are meeting your friends or to your project groups or you ghost people, right? Or leaving an abusive relationship or toxic friendship. Or we lose a part of ourselves that always wants to fit into popular culture and trends such that it prevents us from becoming our best selves. So one more fun fact, right? Last week, right? So Oxford English Dictionary announced the 2022 Oxford Word of the Year, which was the word goblin mode. Okay, because it's a term, not really a word. So goblin mode is a slang term, okay, often used in the expressions in goblin mode or going into goblin mode. So it's a type of behavior which is unapologetically self-indulgent, lazy, slovenly, or greedy, typically in a way that rejects social norms or expectations. So this slang rose to popularity over the months following as the pandemic's restrictions eased in many countries, and people started to venture out of their homes more regularly. So Casper Grefwall, president of the Oxford Languages, right, the one who administrates this, said that people have been embracing their inner goblins. Okay, every one of us, we have an inner goblin. We have the ugly side of ourselves. Note that our culture's obsession with perfectionism and self-improvement can be exhausting for most people. Yes. And the point of going into goblin mode is to stop trying to fix yourself and just be yourself. And he also says that it is a relief to acknowledge that we are not always the idealized, curated self that we are encouraged to present on our Instagram, on our TikTok. So, good kind of losses, right? So now, the reality of life is that we will experience both bad and good losses at different junctures of our lives. And it's not just you and me sitting right here. Every human being experiences it. Even in the Bible, there are countless of instances where people had experienced loss through wars, heartaches, or losing a part of themselves so that they can grow to become better. And since Christmas, if you don't know, is about Jesus, the birth of Jesus, we're going to go into the Bible to a particular moment in Jesus' life in Luke 24. So it's on the screen. I'll show it to you. And to give you some context, Jesus, if you don't know the story, was crucified and he died on the cross. The whole world, not now, back then, the whole world knows about it. And 3 days later, Jesus was found missing from his tomb. And everyone was like, oh no, what happened? What happened to the body? Everyone was in shock. So we're going to go in Luke 24, verse 13. So the title of that passage is The Road to Emmaus. So verse 13, that same day, two of them, Jesus' disciples, were walking to the village Emmaus, about 7 miles out of Jerusalem. They were deep in conversation, going over all these things that had happened. In the middle of their talk and questions, Jesus came up and walked along with them, but they were not able to recognize who he was. Interesting, right? He asked, "What's this you are discussing so intently as you walk along?" And then they just stood there, long-faced, like they had lost their best friend. Oh. So then one of them, his name was Cleopas, said, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard what's happened during the last few days?" And then verse 19, he said, "What has happened?" Okay, very funny, okay? So the first point I have for you today, right, is Jesus wants to share in your losses. Jesus wants to share in your losses. So no, I love this particular moment, right? Because Jesus isn't all about like doom and gloom, like all very serious kind of thing. Okay, he has a certain human level here. So you think about it, right? So Jesus is the main character of the story. Not just this story, but in that moment, he is the main character. He's like the hot topic, everyone's talking about him, right? And if this happens today, Jesus' name will be all across media, social media, whatever platform that you're using. Everyone's talking about him. And I mean, Jesus, the main character of the story, knows the story, right? He is the person you're talking about. And it's not like the crucifixion happened 3 or 30 years ago. It's just like 3 days old. So, okay, I'm going to try to act this out. Okay? So imagine with me for a moment, right? So the disciples were walking towards Emmaus. And then Jesus just appears to them and then casually asks them, "Oh, what's this you are discussing so intently about?" And then the disciples, like the face very gloomy, right? Like very irritated, like, "Huh? Are you the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard what's happened to you the last few days?" I don't know how Jesus responded, but I don't know how he kept a straight face, okay? So Jesus, right, maybe with like a very cheeky, innocent face, right, looks, right, and then says, oh, what has happened? Right? That kind of thing. Now, okay, maybe a summarized version would be Jesus look at them, say like, "Why are you so sad? No, what has happened?" Now, you see, Jesus here doesn't need to be filled in with the facts or details of the events. He knows it all. He's the one they're talking about. And I don't think he was doing a fact check either by asking them what has happened. Like, "Oh, you said this wrong. Is this thing then is correct." Okay? He's not doing that. It's because Jesus prioritizes our hearts over facts. You see, Jesus loves us enough such that he cares about how we are doing and how we are feeling over exactly what we went through. He wants to listen to what is on our hearts. He wants to feel what you are feeling. He wants to have a share in your loss. So if that's the case, where do we start? How can we share our losses with Jesus? Well, we can start by sharing what's on our hearts with him. By telling Jesus our story. So back in verse 19 to 24, right? So he said, "What has happened?" They said, okay, it's a long story. They said, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene," referring to him as a third person, right? Jesus the Nazarene. He was a man of God, a prophet, dynamic in work and word, blessed by both God and all the people. Then our high priests and leaders betrayed him, got him sentenced to death, and crucified him. And we had our hopes up that he was the one about to deliver Israel. And it is now the 3rd day since it happened. But now some of our women have completely confused us. Okay, don't say this. This is like, you'll get cancelled if it's 2022. And some of our women have completely confused us. Early this morning, they were at a tomb and couldn't find his body. They came back with the story that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of our friends, they went to check, right? They went off to the tomb to check and found it empty, just as the women said. But they didn't see Jesus. So even as I read it, right, you could immediately tell that the disciples actually lost hope, right? And they were in a state of confusion, like, what's going on? And I'm pretty sure Jesus, the one standing with them, felt that too. So now, personally for me, growing up, right, I consider myself as like an emotionally constipated person. Okay, I don't know if any of you are like me, okay? I only have 3 words in my emotional dictionary. Happy, sad, angry. And I'm happy as long as I feel good. I'm happy I'm angry when things don't go in my way or I feel hungry. And then everything else, right, just lump into sadness. Right? Emo. Okay, I'm sure every one of us, right, has their emo, sad boy moments. Okay, everyone goes through that in their life. So I remember there was one time, right, I came home after school, right, very angry, right, very fuming, right, because I had a little quarrel with my project group. And you know when you're angry, all you want to do is just scream and then to complain, right? So that's what I did. I went to my room, I started complaining to God. Get easier because I thought God would reply me, okay? God, I complain to you, then I throw everything to you, okay? And I complained to God about what happened between me and my friend, what he did wrong, what he should have done instead. And after 15 to 20 minutes of complaining, or rather when I ran out of things to complain, and then I felt God speaking into my heart saying, so, how do you feel about it? And I was so shocked. Okay, I know it's like, oh, so sweet, right? But I was so shocked. And I got even angrier. Then my head was like, God, I spent 15 to 20 minutes, complaining to you, right? Telling you all these things, right? Now you're asking me how I feel about it. Shouldn't you know? Are you wasting my time? Whoa. Okay. And then it came a second time, and God was telling me, I already know what happened. You have said it very clear. But how are you feeling about it? And then suddenly my face turned red, right, from embarrassment, okay? Have you ever felt like that before? When you're just like, you realize you did something wrong, then suddenly you are just like, blush and like, oh my gosh. But it was in that moment I began to share my feelings with God. God, I feel this way. And then suddenly I felt a heavy burden being lifted off my chest. And it's that feeling of as though someone empathized with me, saying that I understand how you're feeling, and someone supporting me emotionally. I felt better, and more than that, I felt this sense of love and peace from God. So looking back, I realized that Jesus did the same thing to me as he did to his disciples. And I feel that that's what Jesus also wants to do for many of us here today. He wants to share in your losses. So Psalm 34, verse 4 to 6 on the screen, it says, God met me more than halfway. He freed me from my anxious fears. Look at him, give me a warmer smile. Okay, don't always become angry and sad. Never hide your feelings from him. When I was desperate, I called out and God got me out of a tight spot. So friends, Jesus is reaching out to you today. Now, he's meeting you halfway or even probably a bit more. And yes, he already knows what happens to you. He knows that you're going through some stuff. He knows that you have been through some painful losses. And he wants you to share your heart with him, just like a little HT moment with him. And he wants you to say, he wants to say to you, what happened? How do you feel about that? And sitting here, if you say you want to recover from whatever loss that you've been going through in your life, will you make a decision to reach back out and grab Jesus' hand? Not saying like, Jesus, I'm reaching out to you. I want to share my heartaches and heartbreaks with you. No, Jesus, will you heal me from this loss? And I believe you're going to kickstart the journey towards recovering from your loss together with Jesus. And we'll have a moment later to pray. So that's the first point. So second point is Jesus is with you in your journey to recovery. So we're going to go back to Luke. So it's interesting to see Jesus' response to his disciples after they shared their stories. Okay, this is quite epic. So verse 25, then he said to them, so thick-headed, so slow-hearted. Oh, ouch. Now, why can't you simply believe all that the prophet said? Don't you see that these things had to happen, that the Messiah had to suffer and only then enter into his glory? Then he started at the beginning with the book of Moses and went on through all the prophets, pointing out everything in the scriptures that referred to him. So Jesus responded by scolding them. Okay, that's not the end. Of course, he followed by teaching and speaking the truth. So you see, our journey to recovery starts when we hear the truth and not just what we want to hear. Yeah. Tough fact. Okay, must take it into heart. So, we all love friends who tells us what we want to hear. I mean, I do lah, correct? I'm pretty sure you do as well. To have that friend who's always there, comfort you, sayang you, right? To hear our broken stories and go, oh, come on, let me give you a hug, right? Don't get me wrong, I think Jesus does that sometimes. But Jesus is more than just a comforter. Jesus speaks truth in our lives so that we know where to start. In the case of the disciples, Jesus recognized that the root of their loss is disbelief, that they had lost hope for the future. So perhaps some of us here, an example would be like we have been in an abusive relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or relationships at home. And there has been things that is done to you, said to you that hurt you physically, mentally, and emotionally. And if you come to Jesus today, of course, yes, he will comfort you. But Jesus will also speak the truth in your life. That perhaps in those relationships, you've got to set clearer boundaries if possible, to stand up and say no. And in some of these relationships, when it is hard to stand up to say no, perhaps it is for you to walk away knowing to look out for these red flags, if we use the modern term, and who you don't want to become in the future. So, of course, Jesus didn't just drop a bomb and leave the disciples hanging and add on to their doubts, right? It's like creating more problem than it is solution. It says that he went through all the teachings with them. So, verse 27, it says, then he started at the beginning with the book of Moses. So, just give you a reference, right? I have my thick Bible here. Okay, so roughly, he went through this much content, half. Okay? Okay? This content, went through, starting with the book of Moses, so page by page, and went through all the prophets, pointing out everything in the scripture that referred to him. And then verse 28, it says, they came to the edge of the village where they were headed. So now this is very interesting, okay? So if you recall, the disciples were on their way to Emmaus. The journey was 7 miles, which is roughly 11 kilometers if you walk in a straight line. This is not a straight line because there's roads there, okay? So 11 kilometers, to give you some reference, is the full length of East Coast Park, from the Marina Bay area all the way to the Changi area. So this is the reference there. But in Jesus' time, there were, of course, lesser roads, lesser civilization. Right? The journey, if you walk straight, right, it will take about 2 to 3 hours. Okay, of non-stop walking, no rest on, okay? For some of us, maybe it takes an entire day, right? I know it sounds tiring, okay? So think about it. So within this 11-kilometer journey, not even marathon, okay, just walking, okay, that takes about 2 to 3 hours. We learned that Jesus recited everything page by page about all the prophecies that is recorded in the Bible. And Bible scholars estimated there are about 351 of such prophecies. Okay? So again, let's imagine, okay, that we are living in this story and you are the disciples. So you are heartbroken, it's like very confused, I lost my belief, I'm having this belief, right? And then you learn to just let out some steam, let's go for 11 kilometers walk. Okay. Then after that, once you start walking, maybe like the first 1 kilometer, then there's this random person that bump into you, boom, okay? Then see that, oh, you're so sad, right? No, ask what happened, and then, oh, this happened, I'm going to speak truth into your life, right? But then Jesus decides to walk with you for the rest of the journey. And every few steps that they take, Jesus shares a story, a prophecy that was recorded in the Bible. And why does he do that? Because he wants to build their belief. Every step he takes is like, story number 1, the Bible says this. Story number 2, the Bible says this. Then within this 11-kilometer journey, right? The last step, story number 351, the Bible says this. Okay? So I don't know about you, okay? Now, if I was Jesus, I would have made this so much easier, okay? If I have God's power, I'll just like, snap, done, right? No belief, tada, done deal. I'm gone, see you next time. But that's me, okay? But Jesus chose to be with them throughout the journey. And because Jesus chose to do that, something amazing happened to the disciples. They recovered from their disbelief, their loss. So in verse 32 to 35, it says, back and forth they talked. Didn't we feel on fire as he conversed with us on the road, as he opened up the scriptures for us? They didn't waste a minute. They were up and on their way back to Jerusalem. They found that 11 and their friends gathered together, talking away. It's really happened. The master has raised up. Simon saw him. Then the two went over everything that happened on the road and how they recognized him when he broke the bread. So it says here that they did not waste a minute. So after the journey ended, they immediately got up and then they went back to Jerusalem. By the way, that's another 11 kilometers. and at the end of the day, the point is that they recovered from their loss. Yes. Now they feel excited. Their disbelief became belief. Yes. And friends, like the disciples, I believe that Jesus is with you throughout your journey to recovery. Yes. Now, for some of us here who have a relationship with Jesus, I want to encourage you that Jesus will see through your loss. He's there to comfort you, but also speak the truth and guide you in every step toward recovery. And I hope that you will be sensitive to what Jesus is speaking to you and be faithful to him. But for some of us who don't know Jesus, perhaps you are waiting for, I'm waiting for Jesus to appear, right, in your journey towards recovery. It can feel lonely when you're doing it alone. Or that you need more than just friends, your own support group. You're looking for healing on the inside. And friends, I want to let you know that Jesus has always been there for you. And he has already appeared in your life. And is with you. But sometimes we fail to recognize him not because he's not there, but because we don't know him yet. Which brings me to my last point. Jesus wants to have a human connection with you. Basically, Jesus wants to know you. So Luke 24, verses 28 to 31. So where we left off, they came back to the edge of the village where they were headed. This is Jesus, it's quite funny here. He acted as if he were going on, but they pressed him. Stay and have supper with us. It's nearly evening, the day is done. So he went in with them, and here is what happened. He sat down at the table with them, taking the bread, he blessed and broke and gave it to them. At that moment, open-eyed, wide-eyed, they recognized him, and then he disappeared. I'll come to that later, okay? So I love this moment with Jesus again. He's just so funny, okay? He acted as if he was going. Okay, so I find this very funny because it's like when you and your bestie hang out, right? And then it's about time to go home, oh, I need to catch last bus, oh. But then you still want to hang out more, right? Then you walk out of the room, your face still looking at them, then you're like, oh, I don't want to go, that kind of thing. And hopefully, of course, your friends catch on the hint and then decide to hang out longer, okay? And that's what the disciples did. And it says here, but they pressed him, right? Or in other translation, they urged him, Jesus, stay, I want you to stay. And they invited Jesus to stay longer. And they had supper. Okay, in our Singaporean terms, might be prata and iced tea, right? And you know what? Bonding over food is the best way to connect with each other, right? It's the most human way. I don't know, I think that's for me, okay? And when your friends invite you for supper, you know that they are not just your friends, they are like your bro, sis, or whatever you call yourselves, okay? You see, Jesus is God. And with that title, it comes with a lot of expectations, right? Now, we think that Jesus is this mighty being, he's like the hero, right? He's everywhere, he's busy saving the world. But Jesus, in this instance, chose to have supper with them. I mean, Jesus, don't you have anything better to do? Important, you came back you resurrected Jesus. Even in the most comical way possible, he decided to do that. And because the disciples chose to invite Jesus in to have supper together, it was during the supper that God allowed them to finally recognize that this mysterious man that had been walking with them for the entire journey was Jesus. So similarly for us, will we choose to invite Jesus into our lives to be friends with him? Now, here's the interesting thing, okay? So Jesus walked 11 kilometers with them. He spent 3 hours talking to this person he referred to as Jesus, okay? So the person. But yeah, they only recognized him when they had supper. And I think to myself, I don't know about you, why Jesus? Why will you do this? Why didn't Jesus just want them to recognize him from the start? So much easier. Jesus, you don't need to walk 11 kilometers, Well, here's my guess, okay? Now, if Jesus had revealed his identity earlier, the disciples would have been in shock. Oh! Right? And they would have bombarded him with questions. They might not even stop to listen to him, just keep talking, right? And they would have ended up being more confused than it is believing. And then Jesus would have lost the opportunity to connect with them later on. So the point of keeping his identity a mystery was so that Jesus had a chance to work on their hearts, to share their losses, to be with them throughout the journey towards recovery. And once their hearts are healed, Jesus waits for them to have a connection. And more than just a stranger, the disciples wanted to get to know Jesus at an intimate level as a friend. So that's the same for you today. Jesus had always been there for you in your life, through your ups and your downs, in the losses and the scars. And today, he wants to have a connection with you. He's a friend that acts like, he's going, but he looks at you, I'm really going, I'm really stepping out the door, waiting for you to hey, don't go, right? He's waiting for you to invite him to hang out longer in you. And he hopes for you to not just share your heart with him and let him heal you, but he longs for a relationship with you. So you see, Jesus doesn't want to play doctor, okay? He doesn't want to just heal you and that's it, or to be your therapist. Jesus wants to be your friend. So personally for me, I've invited Jesus into my heart 11 years ago. I think some of you are not even born yet. Right? The babies, I'm talking to babies. Okay. I'm still young, I'm not that old. Okay. I was like, what's the response? Okay, but the story about how I got to know Jesus is quite epic, okay? So before coming to TiVo, I was just a average kid, okay? I didn't have any dreams, I didn't have any aspirations, I just followed whatever my life, my results got me to. Okay, I'll summarize, I was just existing, okay? But when I enrolled into poly, I got to know Tivo through a classmate. And then one random day, I just shared with my friend, right, that I recently bought a guitar and was interested in learning it. Well, somehow, coincidentally, he knows how to play the guitar, and he offered to teach me in church. Okay, so back then, right, I wasn't familiar with church, with God, and Christianity in general. Okay, but I go like, why not free guitar lessons, right? Very practical. Okay. And it happened to me that day I was there. Happened to be a mini gathering going on. So I remember Zihan was the one that is sharing a short message, and he prayed for everyone. And then when it was my turn, Zihan prayed about what he felt God was speaking into my life. And I roughly, remember it till today, okay? It was about how I was like this image of a ship sailing in the sea. But there wasn't a destination. Now I was like wandering around aimlessly, but at that moment, there is a lighthouse, and it was shining its beacon light around me, signaling me to come over. But for me, I had to make the decision to steer the ship to go there. So I don't know what happened there, right? So at that moment, I somehow felt this deep meaning that the lighthouse represents Jesus and that he is signaling me to come over. And it suddenly came into my mind that Jesus was using this as a metaphor to say that he is inviting me into a relationship, to come and get to know him so that I will no longer be lost. So to be honest with you, okay, I know sounds quite cool, right? At the moment, I was very shocked. I was like, what's going on? Everything was new to me. I was like, I'm downloading information at a speed that I never knew I could. And suddenly I hear and feel all these things, but somehow at the moment I felt very touched. And after that session, I decided to pray and invite Jesus into my life. And of course, everyone hopes that you'll be like, damn, done deal. Jesus, I'm with you. My life is perfect. But that moment wasn't some sort of immediate, miracle for me. But after a few months of coming to church, I learned how to pray and connect to Jesus. And ever since, Jesus has been very real to me, literally like a best friend. When I pray, I could feel his presence around me and in me, not just in church, but when I'm at school, when I'm eating, when I'm chilling, when I'm watching Netflix, he's there. When I read the Bible, I could hear him speak. And there was just so many times, 11 years ago, right? So many times that Jesus spoke the truth in my life so that I can become a better person, a better friend sometimes. Jesus been there with me through the very high moments where yay, and also the low moments where I complain. Jesus hears my complaints and sometimes occasional lame jokes. And that was for the very first time that I felt like I wasn't just simply existing. I felt alive. I felt so much joy and purpose in the things that I do, especially in church. From leading people, to serving on the worship team, to standing here sharing my story with you. So you see, had I not made the decision 11 years ago to invite Jesus into my heart, I wouldn't be able to live a full, meaningful life today. And to me, Jesus isn't some far, far away God that only appears in text on the Bible or some idea or philosophy. He's right here with me, like a close friend. He's someone I can share my heart with and challenge me to become a better human being. And that's my hope today, is that you will also invite Jesus into your heart. Because there is so much more Jesus can do in you and through you when you have a real, loving, personal relationship with him. So I'm going to land now. I'm going to invite you to stand up with me today. And we're going to come back full circle, okay? I want to conclude about what Jesus does with our losses and scars. So back to our passage in Luke, we ended off with a very weird sentence, right? After the disciples invited Jesus to have supper and Jesus revealed himself, something weird happened. It says in verse 31, and then he disappeared. I don't know about you, I find it very strange. Are you like playing a prank, right? First he appears to them, Jesus appears to them on a journey, but he prevents them from recognizing him. Then he spent time, he healed them in their loss. He accepted their invitation to supper, then gone. But I don't know what happened, but perhaps to me, Jesus' disappearance was to remind the disciples that he is gone. So remember, Jesus was crucified and he died. And even though I believe that he can choose to come back permanently in a full physical body, but he didn't. So here are my thoughts. Jesus isn't here to erase reality. No, it is still a fact that we went through losses in our lives. The disciples lived in the reality that Jesus was crucified by human beings. But Jesus turns their wounds, their open wounds, into scars to heal them. The disciples gained a relationship with Jesus, which healed their loss. But Jesus left a scar in their lives to remind them that what they have been through, and it's all real. And he did that not to put them back into loss, okay? But he did that to give them a hope for a better future. You see, the thing about scars is that scars are signs that we are healed. Scars are symbols of strength that we have overcome our loss. So what Jesus is doing here is, Jesus isn't here to erase the reality of loss. He empowers you to overcome them, to give you a better future that is filled with hope. So last passage I want to share with you today, in another account in John 20, verse 19, it says, later on that day, the disciples had gathered together, but fearful of the Jews, had locked all the doors in the house. Again, another interesting moment. Jesus entered somehow. Jesus entered, stood among them, and said, "Peace to you." And then he showed them his hands and sides. If you don't know, these are where the nails were. The disciples, seeing the master with their own eyes, were awestruck. Jesus repeated his greeting, "Peace to you. Just as the Father sent me, I send you." So to me, I'm glad that Jesus resurrected with scars on his body, that he did not erase them. Because it was evidence that Jesus has indeed lost his life by human hands. He was nailed to the cross on his hands and on his feet. But the scars show that he has overcome death itself, that he is very well and alive. And the same way that he has overcome the loss of his life, Jesus wants us to do the same in our own losses. And that line, "Just as the Father sent me, I send you." He was telling the disciples, "No, look at these scars. Just as how I overcome my loss, now I'm empowering you to do the same. Look at these scars. I'm here to share in your losses. You're not alone. I'm with you. Look at these scars. I've been looking out for you. Will you invite me into your hearts?"